Welcome to the CDFA Hotline. My name is Kristen Sharon. Stefania Straight is here with me today, and Stefania is the founder of Street Smart Divorce. Stefania has been a financial planner for over 20 years, and her approach to divorce is centered on respect, empowerment, and strategic financial planning. Through her signature Divorce Simplified process, she helps clients navigate divorce with fewer delays, fewer unknowns, and a lot more peace of mind. So welcome, Stefania. We're happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Kristen, and I'm excited to be able to be here with you and to have a chance to talk with everyone out there as well.
All right. For those of you who are new, our hotline will give you the opportunity to ask professionals in the divorce and financial industry questions about the divorce process. The purpose of our show is to provide general information as it relates to divorce and to showcase how certified divorce financial analyst professionals can help. And while we will be answering questions about divorce and finances, we cannot offer personalized financial or legal advice. The reason for this is because each divorce situation is so specific, and there's many factors that may impact your particular situation, such as state-specific statutes and guidelines. We're going to answer questions generally and hope to steer you towards some great resources, information, and professionals that can help you. But nothing you hear on this show should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or tax advice. This show is educational, not advisory. We do, however, hope to provide you with some great information and resources to point you in the right direction. All right, let's dive into it. So Susan from Arizona is asking, is it normal to have no idea where the money goes in your marriage?
Yes, and I'm glad that that's the first question to ask today, because what I have come across is that the budget is the least known and least understood aspect of the household, whether you work or you do not work, period. That is where I spend the most of the time trying to get people to understand where they spend their money and then develop a budget from that. So it's always interesting to see what people give me when I ask them, so why don't you just give me a budget? Do you have a budget? Sure. Yes. No. Maybe. Well, I did. So I have all these different varied answers, but what they spend is always different from what they feel like they spend. So it's a very feelings answer I've recognized. So I bring in the numerical and the logic aspect to it.
Great. Alex from Colorado wants to know, can you start financial planning even if you're still trying to decide whether divorce is the right move?
Absolutely. Financial planning is something that you should do every day of your life. You negotiate with yourself just to get up out of the bed at what time, even if the alarm goes off. You negotiate what you're going to wear. So you negotiate your financial plan with yourself every day, just like we negotiate should we have that brownie or donut or not, especially at Christmas time, which we just passed up, right? Should we start the gym? Should we stay at the gym? So absolutely. And what I have discovered as a divorce financial planner is that that's what it is. We're more of a planner than we are an analyst. The analyst aspect starts first, and then it moves into the planning stage. So you can actually help recommend to, as an individual or as a couple, based on what your role is in their divorce, on how to be able to give them some really good, educated, and informed information so they can make, once again, educated and informed decisions and remove as much emotion out of it as possible.
Oh, I like that. Um, okay, Karen from North Carolina is wondering, am I behind in my divorce if I have not even looked at any financial documents yet?
No, I would say you're not behind in your divorce, but it explains a lot to someone like me, who you are much more of a feeler than a thinker. And so many people approach divorce no different than they do their daily life, their daily financials, is how do I feel about this as opposed to what do I think about this? And so, yes, you need to start doing that. But as I tell many of my clients, divorce is transactional, it's not emotional. At the same time, I recognize that the number one driver of financial decisions is emotions. And so she does need to find someone like us. An attorney is not educated in this field, much less financials in general, to be able to help support her in order to be able to, one, it sounds like she's a little afraid, not to be afraid of it, first of all, going back to the feelings. And number two, understand how to start taking it in little bites, which would start with the budget. That's where we always start. Great question.
That's great advice. Mark from New Jersey says, once we separate, are we still sharing money or does that usually change right away? I'm not sure how to approach this situation.
Okay, that's another great question. It depends. And the reason why I say it depends, first of all, it's the state. What are the state requirements? Now, I'm going to say that legal should not lead because legal is a rights based approach. And what we're trying is an interest based approach, right? So, what's going to be best for you long term? But we are always taking that into consideration, but because a marriage is a legal entity, right? And so that's what it gives each state the opportunity to be able to say, if it's community property state, if it's not, what's split, what's not split. But I see that as a last resort. That should be only if you cannot agree, come to an understanding of what's going to work for the both of you moving forward. Many people that I see as they come into my office have already separated their finances and sometimes have already moved out. Not everybody's moved out and separated finances. So I want to make that very clear. Sometimes people have separated finances and still live in the same house. But what I have recognized is that people, when they come in, either have already separated their finances from the beginning. A lot of people will have individual accounts, especially if they're a second, third, or fourth marriage. And then you have some people that will be joint. So really, that's going to be a question with your divorce financial analyst to see what is the overall atmosphere of the relationship. Are both people working? Can both people support themselves? What are the living situations? And also, are children involved? Those are the first questions that I ask to begin with. And then you can move down that road to see when and how they should separate.
I love that you pointed out that it's better to have a plan in place for how to divide those. So it's a great question to ask rather than just doing it and then trying to figure it out from there. So great
Yeah,
advice.
right. Have some kind of an understanding of what that should look like if it's not already separated. And then sometimes you may need to change that. And I'm not talking about spousal support, maintenance, alimony, however you want to call it, or even child support. We're talking about what the numbers actually reflect and what they will actually support today and going forward, because nothing is assured. Whether you own your business, whether you're employed, things change. You can make more, you can make less, you could be fired. My biggest concern is disability, because a lot of people are not covered with that, even if you have life insurance in place. So as you can see, it can become very complicated. So the question is, if you've already done it, is it working? Why is it working? And if not, when and how should you do it properly for the both of you and for the health of your entire family, financial health?
And I would say that this is where most divorces go off the rails and get driven towards litigation is if that piece is not handled well.
Absolutely, I agree. Alimony, just like everything else, tends to be very emotional. And that's one of the reasons why I start with a budget, is because if there is even any question about alimony, we need to have it based on something that makes sense. And I have also recognized that the vast majority of states have some type of a financial form that's submitted to the court or that you work with. Some states call it a financial affidavit. They just have different names to it. But I've also recognized the vast majority of them are are completed and filed incorrectly. Period.
Mm.
That's once again why I started the budget. So then you're working on wrong numbers, and the lawyers are not going to question your numbers. I will question your numbers to make sure they're adequate and correct. And it is the foundational, it is the bedrock of anything that you do, even splitting the assets and the liabilities and all this other stuff. The budget is the most important. And so you need to work with correct numbers. That's why when you take out a mortgage, for example, those that have ever done that before, there's a lot of questions and a lot of statements that need to be answered and given in order to make sure that the bank feels comfortable to give you that money, that they think you can pay that. Well, that's no different than anything else that we're discussing, especially when you have spousal support. Can that person fund that and fund that for the period of time that they're saying? And then also, can you support your own self and help? Because there is no stability in another person's support to you. And I try to really impress that upon individuals, is that if something happens to that other individual, just like in death, what are you going to do? If they can't pay that bill to you, what are you going to do? And people don't think that. They think it's an automatic because the court stated that. I'm like, not necessarily. Life happens.
Yeah, it's very true. Okay, Lisa in Michigan says, if my spouse paid all the bills, how do I figure out what our monthly expenses actually are?
So that's an interesting question because does she mean that she has no access to the bank accounts? That's my first question. Does she not know how to access the accounts? Does she not see any bills? Do they not receive any paper statements? I know most people receive them electronically, but even if you don't have access to the electronic statement to be paid through that, you should see it on the bank account because normally that's not coming off of a credit card statement. That's normally coming out of a regular bank account, meaning a checking or a savings account. So that would be the first question that I would ask. So then the next question would be, this is if they're sitting together, then we would sit and talk about that, or I would talk with the other based on how that dynamic is. If it's where I'm only talking with one, where I'm in an advocate role, then it would be, okay, we need to see the bank statements in order to pull out the electric bill. We need to pull out and see what the restaurant bills are, what the grocery bills are, what the gas bill, if there's one, what are the car payments? Do you have them? Do you not? Because that's not an uncommon and that's not gender specific. And I have to really impress that upon people. There are these stereotypes that aren't necessarily correct in today's world. But I would say possibly in the past too. It's whomever controls the money in the household, and it goes back to personalities. If you're not a person that steps up and says, I want to know, and says, well, you just handle it, that's what I normally see. I don't see another person usually controlling it. It happens, and keeping the other individual from knowing that information. But usually it's because of the personalities that are involved. You have one that's more of the leadership type, and then the one that's not. And they say, well, I'll just handle that. And you just don't worry with it. It's not always the man that says that. I have men that come in. I have a current client right now where the man had no clue what the expenses are in the house. He had no access to any of the accounts. In fact, some of the accounts he thought his name was on along with his wife. He had no access because she had a lot of the accounts in her name only, and he did not know that. So it has been a true journey for him as he's going through this divorce process. And by the way, he is the breadwinner and she doesn't work. But he had no access to any of the accounts because he blindly trusted her. And so he's recognizing, obviously, that's coming into play with this divorce. But this has been a true financial journey for him that if he had gone directly to a lawyer, he would have never been able to receive this education so he does not fall into a trap with himself or someone else in the future moving forward. So this has been a very, very great exercise going back to the earlier question about planning.
That's a great answer. Okay, Nicole from Illinois says, how do parents usually plan for kids' expenses after divorce?
That is a great question. No different than you have now. It shouldn't change. What would change, right? So why would the children have greater expenses? They shouldn't. Now, if you're talking about transportation, that would already be discussed and handled during the divorce. If you live off, if one's moved, especially if you have military families, that is a big question revolving around that about support, deployments, moving from base to base, whatever those may be, the issues that they have, because they have no say over where they can, or they have little say, let's just say that, based on their rank and what their particular MOS, their job is within the military branch. But they shouldn't really change a whole lot because the vast majority of couples, as they go through divorce, at some point in time, there's a split, going back to the earlier question, or they're already separated, or they're in the process of doing that in the separate households. So they tend to kind of fall into a pattern already, but the kids are going to the same sports. They're going to the same after school events. They're going to have the same books. They're going to have the same clothes. There may be a small amount of additional clothes that needs to be had at each of the houses and things like that, but it shouldn't be a significant spend. I will say that what I have noticed is the expenses for the children go up when you have parents try to buy their children's love if they aren't already doing that before. So you call that a Disney dad or a Disney mom. That's where I see the expenses tend to go through the roof. And I always highly advise against that because you wouldn't act or should not act like that in the same household. You should act no different separately. And I strongly encourage parents to continue or improve their parenting collaboration. I'm not a big fan of that word, but collaboration and cooperation so that they have consistency between the households as far as expectations of the children through discipline and then also through money, because the children will learn their money behavior from you. And as the parent, they see a spender and a spender, they'll be spenders. If they see savers, they'll be savers. The question is, there's balance in both. You don't want to save too much and not provide for yourself in the ways that you need. And you definitely don't need to spend too much where you don't have the money that you need to provide for yourself in the way that you need. So children tend to get lost in translation with this, but they learn their money habits and their emotions about money from their parents. And so parents need to recognize, whether you're in one house or not, that it's very important to recognize you have young people watching you, and then they will repeat your mistakes and they will repeat your successes.
That is so true. Okay, Heather from Washington says, how do parents think about future expenses like college once the finances get split? What conversations should we be having?
That conversation is no different, once again, than the other conversation you would have. Very few people address that during the divorce because the children are not of minor age anymore, so they're not anyone's necessary dependent. And it tends to just fall along the same lines as it would before. So let's say you have a dad, and the dad was the money, provider, the breadwinner of the household, and it was kind of assumed that he was going to be the one that provided for college. Then he most likely will continue to do that. But at that point in time, it will be a discussion between himself and that oldest child. Now, if you're getting along, which is the hope for everyone, because that's the best for all of us, right? We want to have healthy children moving forward and growing up. I've told people you could possibly be better parents in two separate households than in the same household, and that's the goal. And so talk with the other parent. If the other parent is going to contribute financially, I think out of respect for the other parent, as if you would in the same household or should, you still talk with them about it. But once they leave and they're out after high school, that tends to shift towards the parent and the child. If both parents are going to contribute, both parents should talk with each other so you're not overfunding the child because, well, children will take it and so would I. I mean, if you're going to give me more than I should, who am I to say no, right? So that's where you really need to talk about it. You do have underfunding issues, but I think you probably have a problem more with overfunding issues because of the lack of communication. So number one is the lack of communication. But to circle back, it tends to not be discussed during divorce. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. And part of the reason why is most states have a robust scholarship program for kids that tend to do better in school, which tends to be the kids that usually go to college or some type of technical school. And so that discussion has already been had. I just had a client to where they had a prepaid tuition program in place for their one son. It was easy. It was essentially non-consequential in the conversation as far as it would just continue as it is. And now, since they're going to have two separate households, the other parent said, okay, maybe I'll start to contribute. But the initial parent, who was the main breadwinner of the household, said, well, that's not going to change. Very, very easy conversation it tends to be. So hopefully that would continue to be the case moving forward. But number one is communication. Number two, it tends to continue to happen along the same lines, as long as the finances are there, Because I have had parents come in and they say, my kids are older and they're going to get a scholarship. What do we do with the money? Right. And it depends on the state, the fund, how it's separated, it's 529, those types of things at that point. And then also too, remember those accounts, it depends on the type of account, but the vast majority of those accounts do belong to the child. And so it becomes questionable in divorce. And because you have non-financial people involved the vast majority of the time, they get that confused and it's counted as an asset. And there are many times it should not be counted as an asset and split. So it ends up harming the child. So I just did want to throw that side note out there at the end.
And that's really, really important advice to get from a professional.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question. We have Elaine from South Carolina who wants to know when is the right time to bring in someone who understands divorce finances?
Before you even speak to a lawyer. And that's not disenfranchising lawyers, and that's not stating that you don't have legal rights. However, before you can truly speak to a lawyer knowledgeably and ask them good questions and be able to actually work with them and then know the right lawyer for you, and I'll explain that in just a second. You need to have a good grasp of your finances, what you have going on today, what you've had in the past, and where you feel like you can go in the future and not guess about it at all. And so then when you go and speak with lawyers, I've noticed people just guess because they don't know what to ask. They're very afraid, maybe traumatized at this point. And so they don't know how to interview lawyers. So my hope is as time goes on, I am able to talk with others like I am today. And thank you very much to IDFA and you, Kristen, to be able to share some of the experience and wisdom that I have and knowledge that I've been able to gain over the last several years is that you should interview a lawyer, just like you should interview your doctor, just like you go on a date, you're supposed to interview someone to marry them, right? And so most people are so emotional, even ones that tend to think logically at times are very emotional and they're very afraid. And so the first thing that I do, or should be, which all IDFA, CDFAs should do, is to give you some type of sense of comfort, to give you the ability to have some sense of peace and calmness moving forward. So then you can have, if needed, have that conversation with that attorney, ask them really good questions. And if they can't answer those questions for you, well, they don't know enough to really help me, at least from a base financial standpoint. So how are they going to help me with my legal rights, right? But also, too, you may have an excellent attorney, and if you don't understand your financials, they can't be the best attorney for you. So it goes both ways. And so they should sit down with a CDFA. That CDFA will give them an understanding of where they are, where they've been, and where they could go in two separate households based on the feelings that they have and any type of logic that they insert, meaning numbers if they bring some and they sit down and they kind of talk about it and say, this is my budget. This may not be my budget. These are my assets. I'm not sure, things like that. And it can get very complicated, especially at stock options and bonuses and things like that. But those are later on to be discussed because that can become just a war of fighting and not anything truly logical in the discussion as far as moving forward if you end up going to litigation. So, number one, our job is to give you some type of comfort and confidence in your current financial life. Doesn't matter if you like it or not, doesn't matter if it's good or not, but it gives you an awareness of where you are and a little bit of an understanding of where you could possibly go. And that way, if you do feel the need to go sit and talk with an attorney, whether you hire that person or not, you are going to have a much better conversation with that individual. You're going to have a better understanding during and after that conversation whether that person is suitable for you because you're going to give them a lot of money and you need to know if that person has the ability to truly represent you in the way that you need them to represent you to live a financially healthy life afterwards. As I say, your new normal.
Well, I want to thanks Tanya for being here with us today. If you have questions for her, you can reach her at streetsmartdivorce.com. We will put a link to that below. And if you need additional information, you can find some great information on our website, which is www.cdfa.com. And if you search for a certified divorce financial analyst on that website, you can find one in your area or in the specialty that you are looking for. So we will have a link for that below, and along with the ability for anyone who wants to submit questions for our next episode. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.